Welcome to Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay, a weekly shot of truth serum for your investment and insurance questions. I'm Josh Knoll, the owner of Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jay Stubbs, Regional Director for First Protective Insurance Group. We are brought to you on the Prime Capital Investment Advisors Podcast Network. We have a very special episode for you today. Joining us in studio is Mr. Will Steih, the Managing Director of Prime Capital Investment Advisors Tennessee office. It's based in Nashville. He also serves as a CPA. You, the listener, are joining us on our Business Owner Strategies and Solutions campaign, which we are endearingly calling our B.O.S.S series, thanks to Jay Stubbs. Great idea. It's a 5-part series specifically designed for the retirement needs of successful business owners. In this episode, we are going to dive into buy-sell agreements, sometimes known as operating agreements. If you have a business, want to learn more about these concepts, you need to listen up. Before we dive into all of this, let's have our friends from Sloth Racer Band kick us off. Jay, Will, how y'all doing today?
Josh, I'm doing great. Good to be with you.
Will?
Josh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite. Chance to participate with you gentlemen. Say that fast or slow.
Now, I will say this, Will. You left Nashville. I know it wasn't bitterly cold, but what was the temperature?
45 and rainy.
45 and rainy. You got down here, what was the temperature?
It was 75 and sunny.
Yes. Yeah, we actually took a walk on the pier, stretched our legs. It was beautiful.
Fabulous.
I think you got sold on our Gulf Coast area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jay said he needs to find a way to do a satellite office. So, all right. So, quick housekeeping for compliance. Jay Stubbs and First Protective are not affiliated with Prime Capital Investment Advisors or Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, and Will Steih is not affiliated with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors or First Protective. So, Jay, I got a question for you to start here. So, if you're a business owner, you're a sole proprietor, entrepreneurs, or maybe you have partners, you work with others, generally speaking, it's presumed that you would have a buy-sell agreement or what some call an operating agreement in place. Is that always the case?
Oddly enough, in situations that I've been in the last several years, when I ask somebody, hey, Josh, what are the triggers in your buy-sell agreement? Sometimes I get a blank stare. They go, what buy-sell agreement? Or what operating agreement? Then the next question, if they say, well, yeah, what's a trigger? And honestly, Josh, if more business owners today took the time to put an operating agreement in place, review it, a buy-sell agreement, review it, and insert the proper triggers in today's lifestyles and the changes that we all have happen to us, it would relieve so much stress when the trigger actually or the event actually happens. So, yes, operating agreements are in place. Yes, people who have buy-sell agreements, if they have them, the good ones are reviewed every year or 2 or 3. The ones that have them that are sitting in the drawer and hadn't even been maybe signed off on after the attorney put them in place, those things need to be pulled out and reviewed, and new drafts need to be on the table for all of those people involved.
Or the business grew like crazy.
Yeah. The business can certainly have multiple changes if the business grows as everybody expects. Will, you deal with these types of people every month, every year, different business owners. You see a lot of buy-sell agreements, or do you sometimes get blank stares?
No, that's in over 20 years of experience and specifically focused on business owners, it's really 2 camps. Those who are prepared and well-prepared and those who think they're well-prepared. And the conversation may go something like, well, there's an understanding. Like, in the case of a female business owner, it's like, well, I've already told my partners, hey, just get in touch with my husband and they'll kind of work things out. And invariably, I have to sort of challenge that notion, say, that's interesting. How often does your spouse communicate with those business partners? Like, well, we have a Christmas party. We're in the Christmas season. Or we have a Christmas party every year. It's like, well, they don't know each other. And heaven forbid your ownership interest needs to be dealt with by 2 remaining partners, and they've got to get in touch with this husband that they've only met on occasion. It really presents itself as it's quite onerous. It's fraught with ultimately the business owner who has to sell their stock, and sometimes even it just might get absorbed. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be honored. If there's nothing in writing, nothing that's been memorialized with a qualified legal professional, then nobody is committed to the process. And so that's the thing, is what we're looking for is we're looking to create a situation where people will be committed to a process. And if the 3 of us are in business, well, I'm committed to you, Josh, and to you, Jay, and vice versa, and we're all in this together. That's ultimately the goal of any well-drafted, well-defined buy-sell agreement. In addition to just having it in writing, we're also going to have mechanisms that's going to allow for that to be funded. So you need to have a funded buy-sell agreement. A big contrast to originally, like I said, we have an understanding, and it's kind of fuzzy, and I'm really hoping it works out for them ultimately, we were trying to help those business owners move down the continuum and end up in a properly structured, funded buy-sell arrangement.
You had mentioned in previous conversations with me, what do you call an unfunded buy-sell agreement?
An unfunded agreement would look something like if the three of us are in business together and it's a $6 million entity, and Josh, we're going to pick on you. You are no longer here. Well, the two of us, Jay and I,
Josh died?
Well, yeah, that's going to happen.
Hypothetically.
Okay. There's a 100% chance of that happening. We just don't know when. Josh, you're not with us, then we've got to figure out a way. How do we help? We're going to have to help Jen out. And as lovely as a spouse as she is and a wife to you and everything else, Jay and I aren't going to have the same connection to her. And so now so when I say funded versus unfunded, if we have to go to company cash flow to buy your stock, Jen may be looking at a situation where she needs to take a note for your stock, and unfortunately you are operating at X on a household spending plan. Hey, Jen, sorry, but you're going to get 30% of X. Well, man, that puts a big pinch on Jen and the kids to try to operate from that point forward. That's unfunded. Funded, or I should say funded through the organization, funded through operations cash flows. What would be funded would be, hey, we have a mechanism, we have a protection mechanism in place, like a life insurance policy, or in some cases a disability insurance policy, where you're not going to be with us for a particular extended period of time. We're going to have the ability to replace your paycheck for your loved one, not just through the operations of the business, but another mechanism. We're going to have an insurance company on the hook for that possibility.
Well, you said, unfunded, and you're talking about, let's just pick on me some more. Really what you have in an unfunded buy-sell agreement is really nothing more than a promise to Jen. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. At its essence, that's the best she can hope for is
a promise. She's relying on the goodwill of the two partners that she may or may not know in that situation, right?
And to every business owner, I'd say, okay, just play that out for a second. If you do have a buy-sell agreement, but it's unfunded, go home and tell your spouse, hey, listen, dear, I want you to understand something. You can trust Jay and you can trust Will. They're going to take care of you, just as good as I was going to take care of you.
Right.
Ultimately, what we're trying to do is move that whole question off the table for the loved one to know, no, you are safe, you are secure. There's going to be an interruption, no doubt about it, but we're trying to minimize the financial impact of that interruption to your family, to your loved ones, the people that have been home supporting you while you're out here with your shoulder to it, helping us grow the business.
All right. Well, Jay, I'm going to come back to you. What in your 20 years of experience do you feel a properly structured buy-sell agreement, the elements of it? What's in that?
All right. So when we use the term buy-sell, people automatically think succession planning. We talked about that in our previous podcast, right? So buy-sell, I've purchased this business or I'm going to sell this business based upon some trigger. However, I also like to say the buy-sell or operating agreement, and sometimes those can be the same, they need to have triggers in place.
All right.
So the most common triggers in operating or buy-sell agreements are death and disability, like we just talked about between you and Will. There's other triggers that need to be considered. Retirement. If the three of us are in business together and my goal is to retire at 55 and I'm currently 43 next February, then I've got 12 years until that retirement trigger takes place. You two guys are going to say to yourselves when we've agreed to it because we signed on the dotted line of the agreement, then what's that going to look like and how is it financially going to impact the business?
Right.
And what tools or plans or structure do we need to put in place today to make sure that Jay, which we all agreed upon, is going to take an early retirement at age 55?
Well, and you also mentioned that the buy-sell should be visited
at least biannually, every 2 to 3 years, and make sure, because business changes, growth, recessions occur, lifestyle changes, people get sick. So triggers, death, disability, retirement. And then a trigger that I like to bring up in conversations is outside of business control situations.
Okay.
So let's pretend for a minute and somebody within our family network, and maybe it's one of our spouses, gets sick. Think the big four: cancer, stroke, diabetes, something that disables them or puts them on the sidelines for an extended period of time. We've got young families we want to take care of and make sure that everything goes proper. And that outside of control instance, if it happens to the Stubbs household, and if something happened to Casey where I've got to go take care of her, you two guys...
Your productivity is going to fall dramatically.
Exactly. But we've got it in the agreement that anything outside of that control situation, we make plans to financially take care of it.
Okay.
And there are different ways that we can do that through benefit planning for our own personal benefits and our employee benefits, but also our spousal benefits.
All right. Well, with your 20 years plus experience CPA, is that accurate? Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. So you've been a privy to many of these agreements from a couple different angles as an advisor, as a CPA. What do you think when someone puts the team together? What's that team look like, and how do those individuals work together to help the business owner?
So again, we're going to keep playing down lines here. This trio that we have that we represent here, the three of us are going to sit at the table. We're going to have an advisor, hopefully somebody like ourselves that's well versed in this area. A financial advisor. Oftentimes we'll have a CPA, somebody that knows our tax situation inside and out. In addition, we also will engage, and it is a. Oftentimes I find people think, well, I just need an attorney. Let me get an attorney. The guy that handled my real estate closing, I'll just have him pop in here, and maybe he won't charge very much. This is a very important esoteric area of the law that you don't need somebody that does a little bit of this every now and then. This isn't going to be a dear honey, here's my will, sweetheart estate plan, as we might sometimes refer to or run into. This is a very specific need that's going to get addressed by a qualified estate plan attorney, somebody that's well versed in this. That has some sample documents that you have a chance to review. And again, by way of referral from either the CPA or the financial advisor, they probably worked with this person previously. That person's going to be hyper-focused on drafting the document that comes out of the discussion that the three of us are going to have facilitated by that advisor. I want to dovetail on something that Jay had said. Oftentimes, I'll hear business owners say, well, I've got that kind of taken care of. You know, something happens to me, Lacey back at home, I've got some life insurance I own in a trust. It'll take care of her and everything else, so she'll be set. Well, I want to make sure that any business owner will appreciate this. Okay, so but this thing that you've put your shoulder into, this thing that you've grown, this thing that you birthed, if you're a first-generation business owner, how do you capture and harness the goodwill and monetize it at some point in time? Because that is an asset of the family. That is a thing that needs to be, there needs to be a mechanism in there in the form of this idea of a funding mechanism. Yes, it makes complete and total sense that you would have protection plans personally, but we're talking about ultimately is to protect the business. We're talking about how do you protect your interest in the business. I can't tell business owners enough. I want to compel them to have the sit down, to have the conversation, to have this discussion where things like, you know, what's the proper valuation formula for the business? Is there any disparity in here between, is it a third, or is there some sort of focus here where, again, Josh, appreciate you letting us pick on you. Maybe you came along and it's 40-40-20.
Right.
We're going to define that. We're going to have a formula within the agreement that specifies at that particular point in time, when the trigger happens, when that moment where there's an event that's outside of our control. But what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to go through a process of valuing the business interest. We all signed off on that document. Again, as we're updating it maybe every other year, we're going to have a formula in place that specifies how we determine what the value is. And we're going to apply these ownership percentages, and we're going to figure out, hey, Josh, your 20% of X is equal to this, and we're going to move forward from there.
Well, and you said something in your conversation about family, and we touched on this on the last podcast, is sometimes family can be formed by the people that are by your side in a workplace for 10, 20, 30 years. You can be as close to them as you are with any member of family. So sometimes it's hard to have those conversations. Jay or Will, how important do you think it is to have a disinterested third-party team at the table with you to help make these decisions?
It's extremely important. It's extremely important. Just you got to have everybody there to understand what the game plan is in the event that, like I said, a trigger occurs. And I also like to point this out. A lot of people, we're talking about the three of us being in business together. Somebody listening may say, well, I don't have any partners. Do I need to have a buy-sell agreement? I've got this operating agreement. Do I need to have a buy-sell? Well, if you've got a key employee within your business and you've identified that individual as potentially the successor to it, you can have a one owner, sole owner buy-sell agreement. Right. You just go to that key employee and be like, look, something happens to me, keep this thing up and running, and I'm taking care of my family, but I also want to keep your family in mind as well. We're going to put something together where you can purchase this business from my family in the event I die prematurely or have a severely disabling event.
Well, and like you all both alluded to, whether first generation, second generation, fifth generation business, whatever it may be, a lot of times you feel like the caretaker once the business gets to a certain point, and you want to see that thing live on beyond you. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you've got a buy-sell agreement, maybe it is a key employee, you've got the ability to drive down the road 20 years later in your retirement and say, man, look at what my business has become. Fair?
Exactly.
Okay. Any other points you all want to add to that?
Just as I was thinking about that on the idea, Josh, as you pointed out, the idea of we have extended family. Like, listen, if you're 50, 60 hours a week, 6 days a week working at it in that, you're building widgets or you're some sort of a service company, whatever it is, that you grow close to those employees and to this idea of, like, I'd often refer to them as chief lieutenants. These are the people that have been with you 10, 15, 20 years. You want to create and have that identified in terms of a succession plan involving a buy-sell agreement Because ultimately, more than one business owner, these becomes a very either paternalistic or maternalistic approach, is to say, I want to help these people continue to get a paycheck from the same entity that they went to work for 20 years ago. I want to help them continue on. And this is really start talking more about what's the legacy going to be. But we want this to continue on down a path, because this is these people have put the blood, sweat, and tears into this business just like I did, and I want to afford them an opportunity to continue that, rather than, oh no, we either had an unfunded buy-sell agreement or we didn't have any agreement. We had one of those, I hope this works out, promises, as you say, and it doesn't go well. Right. Well, all of a sudden now we're in a fire sale situation where the spouse has to turn and say, hey, can we look up and see who our closest, like what's our competitor out there? Ring, ring. Oh, by the way, yeah, I know you've heard that my spouse passed away. I need to sell the business. What do you think you'll give me for it? Well, you know, what do you think that? How do you think that conversation is going to go? It's going to be deeply discounted, if at all, or they're already circling. If we're down here in the ocean area, right? So the sharks are circling. There's blood in the water, and they're already starting to pick off your customers in a way that the value quickly goes towards zero in a big hurry. And that's the thing I again try to compel business owners to realize. You can structure these things in a way. It doesn't just doesn't apply to a partnership setting. It can apply, as Jay was pointing out, to a solo owner. You're going to have somebody who's a chief lieutenant in most businesses that you say, that's the person that, at the very least, they're going to give me a puncher's chance. That's my best shot at getting this thing to continue and harnessing some value out of it.
Very good. Very well said.
Another point to consider is especially businesses that have reliance upon their lending institution, so their banker.
Bankers are very interested in this, for sure.
Bankers definitely want to know that there's an agreement in place, so that in the event something should happen to one of us, maybe one of us was the primary financial backing. Or had
signed the name on the loans.
We were able to have loan agreements in place because of one of us. If that particular person passes away or becomes disabled, not instrumental into the day-to-day operations, the banks are going to raise their eyebrows a little bit. So you want to make sure that there's a funded agreement in place that says we've got that taken care of, Mr. Banker. So we can go back and continue our lending, continue our LOC lines of credit, and keep things rolling. These are things that I hear business owners deal with each and every day. And it's important for you listening to this. If you're in a situation where you don't have some of these I's dotted and T's crossed, now's your chance. You can listen to this and start the conversations with those within your operation as well as those outside of your operation, inclusive of your family.
Perfect. Way to wrap it up. All right. Think these topics apply to you? We can help. Take advantage of our 50 years of collective experience and reach out to us to start a conversation. You can text or call 251-327-2124. That's 251-327-2124 to leave a message. Plus, you can visit Gulf Coast FA, that's FA as in financialadvisor.com, or PCIAwealth.com to hear this podcast and all of our other related podcasts. While you're there, please feel free to share the show. We would appreciate it. And to all you independent and semi-independent advisors and agents out there listening to this show and interested in the value that Jay Stubbs could bring to your practice, you can find him at jstubbs.com. That's JAYSTUBBS.com. So, fellas, another show in the can. Thank Mr. Will Steih of Prime Capital Investment Advisors for joining us today. You did a great job again. Many thanks to our producer, Johnny Gwynn of Deep Fried Studios. I'm going to thank our guy that's behind the video, Mr. Travis Middleton, doing a great job. Sorry about that, Trav. And to to my co-host, Jay Stubbs, and everyone out there that has joined us on this journey, and those that are joining us now. This has been Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay. Do you like the show? Do me a favor, please subscribe on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, you would be doing us a huge favor if you would rate and review the show. It helps other listeners like you find us. Lastly, you like the show music? Go check out slothracerband.com. That's slothracerband.com. And they're going to take us home now. Advisory services offered through Prime Capital Investment Advisors, LLC, PCIA, a federally registered investment advisor. PCIA, doing business as Prime Capital Wealth Management, PCWM, and Qualified Plan Advisors, QPA. Securities offered through Private Client Services, PCS, member FINRA, and SIPC. Gulf Coast Financial Advisors is independent of Prime Capital Advisors. Information presented is for educational purposes only, is not an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. All investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, be sure to consult a tax professional before implementing any tax or investment strategies.